That sermon series is through the Sermon on the Plain. It's Luke's version of kind of the Sermon on the Mount text. A lot of these stories, a lot of these texts, a lot of these teachings of Jesus are very similar, if not identical, but Luke kind of usually gives a little bit of a different take on them. And so with that said, today we are continuing that series, and we have to understand that this whole series, everything that Jesus taught in this Sermon on the Plain, is all about how we need to be different from the world. We need to be different from the things that the world values. All the values of Jesus are things that are different. All the values of Jesus are different than the world's values. And so we're going to continue that today, and we're going to talk about something that's pretty difficult. As if last week wasn't difficult, as if the week before that wasn't difficult, as if the week before that wasn't difficult. But today we continue with the difficult. So pray with me. Father, we just ask that you be here in this place. We ask that you guide us through the text that you would have. We ask that you teach us what it is that we need to know and understand. Father, we just ask that you open our hearts, that you open our minds, and that you make us ready to apply your life to our life. Father, we love you. We praise you. Amen. So I worked at Dairy Queen when I was 15, 16, is about 17. I worked there for a couple of years, really. I worked there starting at age 15, and all I could do was make blizzards and ice cream cones. I couldn't work on the brazier side. I had just Dairy Queen side at 15 years old. And did that for a while. Then I actually got, when I turned 16, then I could go flip burgers. Promotion. And so, but I remember I made a lot of ice cream treats at Dairy Queen. And I enjoyed that job. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed eating ice cream too. And so I made a lot of blizzards. Who likes blizzards? Oh yeah, you're American, right? Anyway, but I love blizzards. And so I remember at Dairy Queen when I was working there, when I was 15, 16 years old, that a small 12-ounce cup was a small blizzard. So the 12-ounce cup was a small blizzard. I remember after tax that cost $2.24. I remember that a medium, the next size up, that was 16-ounce, that was $2.57. And then I remember the large, which was the 21-ounce cup, that was $3.10 after tax. And I remember that the small, we sold a lot of small blizzards, and I made thousands of blizzards. And I can tell you one thing, that a small blizzard isn't always the same size. Here's what I mean. You always got a 12-ounce cup, and you always paid for a small blizzard. But there were basically 3 small blizzards. You would get one of 3. The first one I call the light small. I call it the light small. And so the way we would make blizzards, we'd take our cup, and we'd put a metal collar in it at that time. So you know that metal collar sticks out the top of the cup about 2.5 inches or so, and we'd stick that collar up in that cup, and then we walk over to our Dairy Queen machine, and we would start serving the soft serve in there, and the good ones, they fill the cup along the side, all the way up to the top of the collar. That's a good Dairy Queen employee. Fills that all the way up along the side, so that you have an empty center, and you fill the center with the topping. So then you do that, and then you take it over to your mixer, and you turn that thing on, and then when you mix, all that stuff is in it. And here's the key. You mix it for the shortest amount of time possible. That way you get the biggest chunks of the goodness in the blizzard. These are the trade secrets, okay? These are the trade secrets. But the first type of small, the light small, you get it all mixed, you get everything done, you take it over to the counter, and you would always take it, you'd hold on to the top of the collar, and you'd pop it 3 times on the counter. That jerks everything off of the collar, knocks it into the cup, and then you take the collar out, and we dropped it into our rinse pan. The light small is the small where the ice cream doesn't go all the way to the top of the cup. Now, it's still a small blizzard. You still paid for a small blizzard. I've even been at Dairy Queens where they take that collar off, and you can see the employee go, should I put more ice cream in there? Should I mix up some more? I've seen them take a spoon and fluff it up so it looks like the cup is full. Now, that has never happened at this Dairy Queen. I like this Dairy Queen in Seneca, Missouri, okay? So this is a good Dairy Queen. But there's that first small, it's light. It's not really full. It's a small, and I paid for it, and it is a small blizzard, but it's not full to the top. Then the second type of small that you would find in Dairy Queens is, I call it the legalist small. I call it the legalist small. So this is the small where you do all the same things, you mix it all up, you get done, you take it over to the counter, you pop it 3 times on the counter, and you take the collar off and you scrape it off flush. You drop it in the rinse pan. You give somebody their Blizzard, upside down, of course, and it's flush with the top. Legalist. That is a 12-ounce Dairy Queen Blizzard. No questions asked. You got your money's worth. Donezo. Then there's the third kind of small. I call it the heavy one. This one was what I was known for. It was a goal. It drove my franchise owners nuts. You take your cup, you fill it up, you get everything in there, you mix that sucker, pop it 3 times, and you pull that collar straight off the top. Drop that thing in there. You get 1.5 inches, 2 inches of ice cream sticking out the top of that sucker. It's like a crown of royalty around the top of your Blizzard. You flip that sucker upside down, and you hand it to that person, and you go, there's your small. It's almost a medium. It's almost a medium. I mean, you get 5, 6, 7 good bites out of that before you even get to the regular stuff. That's a heavy small. Now, everybody in their mind, you're going, well, won't that make a mess? Well, yeah, if you don't eat it. Well, who in their mind wouldn't want that small, right? Now, it's a small, you still paid your $2.24. You still, it's the small Blizzard you asked for. And if you're on a diet, sure, it's got the same amount of calories as the other ones. Sure. Yeah, whatever makes you feel good. But, whatever. I mean, who doesn't want that one where it's packed in there, it's coming over the top? I mean, that's the one we want, right? We want all the bonus. We want all the extra. And we want it to still be in that small cup, right? That's what we want. Funny thing is, Jesus draws a Blizzard illustration in the Bible. He says that the cup that we use when we treat people, if we have a cup and we fill it with the love, the mercy, and the grace that we treat other people with, so that cup that we use with other people is the same cup that God uses with us. So the way we show grace and love and mercy to others, if we were to put that in a cup, God uses that exact same cup with us. And I can tell you one thing for absolute certainty. I want the heaviest small I can have. When God deals with me, when God wrestles with me on Judgment Day, when God wrestles with me in eternity, when God wrestles with how I've lived my life, I am hoping that the cup that I can hand him to use towards me is overflowing. It's got the crown of royalty on top. I want that cup. When God looks at me and says, hey, how'd you do? I hope that he sees a cup that is just overflowing, it's packed down, it's shaken, it's as full as it can be, and he uses that. So the question, in all spiritual seriousness this morning, how big is your ice cream cup? How big is your ice cream cup? I mean, when it comes to how God is going to wrestle with your soul and how God's going to look at the way you treated other people, how full is your cup? The text this morning, Luke chapter 6, in the midst of the Sermon on the Plain here from Jesus, starting in verse 37. I'm just going to read through verse 42 this morning. Do not judge others, you will not be judged. Do not condemn others, or it will all come back against you. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven. Give, and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full. Here it is. Pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over, poured into your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount you get back. Then Jesus gave the following illustration again. Can a blind person lead another? Won't they both fall in a ditch? Students are not greater than their teacher, but the student who is fully trained will become like the teacher. As if Jesus is saying, do you know me? Are you living like me? Are you doing what I do? Verse 41, and why worry about a speck in your friend's eye, Why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying, friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log sticking out of your own? Hypocrite. First, get rid of the log in your own eye. Then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. You see, the world has a favorite verse in this text. And that favorite verse is the first one. Do not judge others. Do not judge others. The definition of judge: to form an opinion about through careful weighing of evidence and testing. To form an estimate or evaluation. To hold as an opinion. Okay? The world says, don't judge. And what the world really means by that is, you just leave me alone and let me live exactly how I want to live. You don't worry about me, I won't worry about you, and we'll go on as a happy, cohesive unit. That'll be just fine. You don't worry about me. And even Christians do this. We even say this a lot. We say things like, don't judge me, and what we mean by that is, that's between me and God, and I'll do that. And that means that we say that to people when we think that they're looking at us, when they're judging us, when they're making assessments of our life, when they think we're doing something we shouldn't be doing, or when they're looking down upon us, all this kind of thing. That's between me and God. It says, don't judge me. Okay. But don't we judge all the time? And I mean, is it really bad all the time? Here's the questions. I mean, I look at my kids all the time, and I make judgments about them all the time, and I would argue that they're healthy. Is that safe? Is that godly? Is that obedient? Is that nice? Is that loving? Is that... Yeah. I look at my daughters and my son, and I judge them. That is not right. Or that is so good. All the time. I mean, we make judgments of when we walk to the edge of a curb and we judge whether or not it's safe. Is that okay? We make judgments of whether or not the room we're in is safe for our family. We make judgments all the time about whether or not what we're doing is right or wrong, or other people are right or wrong. Is that not right? I read an article. It was by some lady who was a marketing image consultant. Her name is Anna. She said this. She's done a bunch of studies on judgments, just in the eyes of how our business looks to other people. And she said this. She said that when we meet somebody for the first time, we make 11 judgments immediately. When we meet somebody, we make 11 judgments immediately. She said some of the things that we judge are this. We immediately judge on intelligence, socioeconomic status, education, competence, and here's one I think is pretty important, trustworthiness. She said that these judgments take place subconsciously. She says that all these judgments happen in our brains, whether we want them to or not. And so I would say to the people who say don't judge, you do too. And it's interesting that when we wrestle with this, because here's the issue and kind of the illustration. So Sean and Nathaniel and I, we got to go to Carl Junction this last Thursday. As you know, there's a tornado, and we got to go up there. And you see, Sean and Nathaniel and I, we were really worried about passing judgment. We were really worried about it. So when we drove up there, in order to not make any judgments of anybody, we just pulled into the first house we saw. We cut the guy's trees up, we mowed his yard, we raked him up, got him all clean. It's just a real shame his house wasn't damaged in the storm. That's insane. We didn't do that. We drove into Carl Junction and we judged. You don't need help. You don't need help. You don't need help. You need help. Is that wrong? We judged, we assessed who had a need, and we met it. So the tension. Do we judge? I wonder if it's less important of whether or not we judge, but what we do with the judgment. You see, we saw a need, we met it. We didn't do it perfectly, and we could have done better. And I'm sure there was a lot of people who could have done things better than us. But we saw the need, made the judgment, met the need. And here's where I think it has to come into play, because we read the very next sentence in what Jesus says. He says, don't judge others or you will be judged. There's the cup. Then he says this, and I think this is where it all starts to come together. He says, do not condemn others. Do not condemn others. Now, we don't use that word a whole lot. Defined by Mr. Webster himself, says to declare to be reprehensible. That's a good word. To declare to be reprehensible, wrong or evil, usually after weighing evidence without reservation. It just means that we make the judgment and you are condemned. So we could meet somebody, we could make those 11 snap subconscious judgments, and we could say, hey, all right, this is how we're going to interact with that person. Or we could say, hey, based on the 11 subconscious judgments I've just made on you, you are condemned. I am done with you. You are not up to my standards. You see, when we start to pair these two together, it really becomes a bit of an issue. And now, I know I have things wrong with me. I know that I am not perfect. I know that I have sinned. I know that I have done many things wrong. I know I have many character flaws. And I really don't mind if you judge that. I mind strongly if you condemn me for it. I don't mind at all if you make the judgment that there's something wrong with me and it needs to be addressed. I don't mind that. I mind strongly when you write me off for it. That is different. And here we go. There's this interesting little caveat at the end of this text here, because we say Jesus says don't judge, but in just a few verses later, he says judge. This is how. Read this text, verse 41. It says, and why worry about a speck in your friend's eyes when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying, friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own? Hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Yet Jesus, in this verse, he says, you see the speck in their eye. That's okay. That's a judgment, by the way. If you notice that there's something in that friend's eye, if you notice there's something in that brother's eye, that's a judgment. Okay, there's no way around that. That's what has happened. But Jesus says, and you can even deal with that. Like, you can go to that, and you can help that brother, that friend with that speck. But you have got to look in the mirror. And here's where it gets challenging. Here's where I think it all begins to come together. Is you have got to look in the mirror. I mean, so many of us in this room are quick to criticize. So many of us in this room are quick to point out flaws and say, that's not how you should do it. That's not how I would do it. That's not right. That's wrong. Why are you doing that? Why do you act like this? Why do you do this? All those things. I mean, we can say, spec. And we are hitting people with the log sticking out of our eyes. We swing it around looking for the next wrong thing. It's such a hysterical image that you know that when Jesus said, hey, you see that speck in your brother's eye, but you've got a plank sticking out of your own. You know that the people in the crowd literally laughed at Jesus when he said, because it's a joke. It's humorous. But that's exactly what it looks like to God when we are going up to people and say, that's not right. That's not how I would do that. Why won't you do things right? And man, you're just stupid. All these kinds of things. We do that. All these things. I can't believe you do that. And why are you letting your whatever? And the whole time God's looking down and saying, man, you're good at seeing specks. But you'll never be able to get close enough to him to help him. So, I think Jesus says it's perfectly okay to see specks. And I think Jesus says it's perfectly okay to go up to that friend and that brother and help them with that speck. But we have got to make for certain we don't have 2x4s sticking out of our eye so that we can get close enough, so that we can have a relationship enough, so that we can truly, truly help in a situation where somebody might literally have a sin issue that they need help with. Now, here's what's another interesting fact that I note in my own life is that I wonder why we're so able to see specks in other people's eyes. I wonder if it's because we recognize them very personally. We're able to see that little flaw there and that little flaw there and that little sin over there and that little sin over there because we are very, very personal with those. And we recognize them very quickly. And that's something that we must wrestle with in our own lives. So I don't have a problem at all with you coming to me and telling me about the speck. And I would hope that you don't have a problem with me coming to you and talking about the speck, as long as I have made sure that I am wrestling with a plank in my own eye. Here's the practical application of this maybe for us as a church body. I would hope that we would all have the guts and the honesty to go to our brothers and sisters in this room and say, hey, there's an issue here. And that's judgment, by the way. As long as we make 2 critiques of ourselves first. Hey, why haven't you done this? Hey, why'd you do that? Hey, as long as we ask ourselves those very questions before we hand ourselves over to be a helpful person with these other people, because we don't need people who are just critics and hard on us. We need people who are willing to walk with us. I don't need somebody that's just going to point out my mistakes. I'm pretty good at that myself. I do need somebody who's going to walk with me. And I would hope that you would allow me to do the same, as long as I've looked at the mirror in my own eye. And the most important phrase in this whole text, in my opinion, is not don't judge, is not don't condemn, is not even the speck in the plank text. I think it all comes down to this. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven. How big's your ice cream cup? Is it packed full, overflowing with a crown of royalty? Is it packed full with judgment, condemnation, critique, hate, anger? You don't want to hand that one to God. Or is it full of forgiveness? Here's my hope and my prayer, that when somebody sees a flaw in me, which won't take you very long of knowing me, that you can come to me as a brother and we can address that issue, and then you'll forgive me for it. Because that's what I would think that you would expect of me. If I were to come to you and I were to say, hey, here, I'm worried about you here. I'm worried about these things. That you would expect me not to condemn you for that and hold you down for that, but that you would be raised up by that you would be forgiven by that. That's what this is all about. So the issue, I'm wondering, when Jesus says, don't judge, he says, don't condemn, he says, then forgive. All this goes into the cup together because that's what we want to give to Jesus. Now, here's the thing. We got to take the context of it all. When we talk about judgment, condemnation, and then forgiveness, you see, the text right before this, what we read last week, it had this really important phrase in it. He says, treat others the way that you would want to be treated. I want to treat people with forgiveness. I want to treat people with grace. I want to treat people with truth and honesty. I want that. I want people to treat me that way as well. Now, this text this week, it doesn't say this phrase, but it does in between the lines. It says, you treat others the way you want God to treat you. And now you wrestle with that phrase. So you treat others the way that you want God to treat you. So I want to treat people the way I want God to treat me. So we talk about judgment. We talk about condemnation. We talk about forgiveness. We talk about grace and love and forgiveness and truth and honesty. We talk about all those things. And here's what I want from God. I would hope that I treat people in a way that God would treat me exactly this way. I'm going to be honest with you. I want God to judge me. When I get to Him on the great day of judgment, when I get there, I want Him to look at me and I want to see Him judge me. And I hope the judgment that he makes is welcome home, good and faithful servant. I hope the judgment that he sees upon me is one that I stand in the love and the grace of Jesus in his blood. So to say that I don't want God to judge me, that's wrong. I want God to judge me. I just want the judgment to be good. I want him to look at my life. I want him to not see any of the sins in my life. I want him to put all of those away. I want to know that I'm not being judged for those. I want to know that I'm not being condemned for all of those sins. I want to know that I am completely, utterly forgiven because all he sees in my life is his Son. I want to be judged by God. I want that. And I would be totally okay with everybody in this room judging me in the exact same way that God does. I would be totally okay with that. To walk up to me and want to make me a better Christian man and make me a better person, all those kinds of things, I would hope you would want that. That we could have the type of church family here that would come together and that we would say, hey, here's the deal, I'm worried. I'm not mad at you for it. I'm not condemning you for it. I mean, we've all been there. Plank. But let's get past it. Let's forgive. You see, we've all in this room been hurt. We've all been hurt. Every one of us. Every one of us has been hurt. We've been hurt at work. We've been hurt in our family. We've been hurt by our friends. We've been hurt. We've been hurt. Not everyone in this room has forgiven. I read a statistic from Barna. They said 1 in 4 haven't forgiven. 1 in 4. It's a lot of people in this room who haven't forgiven. And we could talk about the pains that we've had. We could talk about the hurts that we have. We could talk about how people have hurt us so deep, and we say, well, you don't know what that's like, Josh. Well, I may not. I might. We could talk about all that. And we could talk as hurt people who've been hurt, and we could say, you know what? There's 2 responses. Have you forgiven? Have you forgiven that person? Have you forgiven that friend or that family or whatever? And there's 1 response or 2. One of these. And the first one is, nope. No, I have not. Are you going to? Mm-mm. Mm-mm. How full is your ice cream cup? Are you going to hand that one to God and he says, hey, I know you got hurt real bad. And I saw that. I felt the pain. Like I was there. I get it. Did you forgive them? And you go, nope, God, I did not. I held strong for 50 years. You hand that cup to God. And he looks back at you and goes, well, what do you expect from me? I gave my Son for you. I let him die for you. I let him shed his blood for you so that you could be forgiven. So that when you got here, that I would see no wrong in you, that I would see no sin in you, that I would see no judgment in you. I would just see my Son in you. And that you hand me this cup? Well, let me pack it down. Let me make it full of what you've given me. Here you go. That's a scary place. And then the other option is, have you forgiven that person? And you can say, yeah. And maybe for some of us, I believe this, that some people are able to forgive other people much easier. I long for that trait. I think that's awesome. I love it. That some people are just like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I forgive you. And they mean it. Able to go on with the relationship there. But here's the other thing. So many people would say they've forgiven or whatever. And here are the questions I would ask, just so we can self-assess here for a minute. If you've been hurt really bad by a person, a friend, a family, whatever, if you've been hurt really bad, and we can all raise our hand and say, yes, that's happened, and you say that you have forgiven that person, here's a few questions I would ask you. Have you talked to that person? Because I've heard it said, I've heard it defined that forgiveness is when you can act as though you were never hurt. Well, but Joshua, I get it. And here's the truth I wrestle with in that. That's exactly how God treats us. When we get there and when he judges us, and when he sees Jesus in our life, he he acts as though there was never a sin. And that's what you want me to do, God, with people? Yeah. So if you've forgiven someone, have you talked to them? Have you been around that person? Do you ignore that person? Is that forgiveness if you do ignore that person? I'll let you wrestle with God on that one. And here's one too. Does the person that you have forgiven feel forgiven? Now, in order to assess that one, you probably have to talk to them and be around them. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that I think of when I think of this text and forgiveness and judgment and condemnation and being before God and all these kinds of things is that I definitely want to err on the side of really, really, really forgiving when I face Jesus. Because when I look at Jesus and he says, I forgave you for everything, I want to say, me too, I forgave everybody. A lot, over and over, because I was worried about it. That's what I want to say to God, because I want to hand a cup to God that is that heavy, small, man. I want stuff sticking out the top, and I want it to all be forgiveness. I want it to all be grace. I want it to all be mercy. I want to try my best to dig out all those judgments, all those condemnations, all those snap assessments of people that were wrong in the first place. I want to do my best to filter through all that, dig all that out, so when I hand that cup of ice cream to Jesus, it's coming out the top, and it's all forgiveness, it's all mercy, it's all grace, it's all truth. It's tough conversations, but it's relationships built by it. I've had people call me out on my mistakes plenty of times in my life, all my life and continuing in my life. And sometimes I've had people do that. When they come up to me after it is done, I feel absolutely beat to a pulp. They were right. I had messed up. I had sin in my life. They were right. Oh man, they were right. Yes, there was a fairly good-sized chunk in my eye. You are bet. And they dug it out with a hunting knife. There are people that I still have in my life that call me out all the time. And somehow, after it's all said and done, I feel like a person who's more equipped to be a follower of Jesus. That we looked into each other's eyes. We assessed each other. We took the specks out of each other's eyes. We did it as gentle as we could, but as honestly as we could. So what do we do with this text? I don't want this to be a church family made of people who go around judging people in the sense that the world says that the church does. It's true in a lot of ways. I don't want this church being a church full of people who condemn others, whether they be outside the church or inside the church. Sometimes we shoot ourselves as much as we do anything else. I want this church body to be a family that can come together and that we can have honest, accountable conversations with each other where we can say, I am worried about you. I'm worried about your family. I'm worried about your kids. I'm worried about whatever. I don't like what I'm seeing in your life. I'm worried about it. And here's how I recognize it. I did that. How do we move on? That's the relationships that I want this church family to have. And so here's the question I ask you to leave you with today. Do you know Jesus in a way that you truly feel forgiven by him? And if you do, are you applying that relationship with the people around you in your life? Do you have somebody in your life you have not forgiven? Do you need to address that? Because there's a scary reality here that when we forgive, we will be forgiven. Here's the cup, Lord, what's in it? How full is your ice cream cup? And what's it full of? Pray with me.